Speaking about the mitzvah in the Torah of Dvar Sheker Tirchak, one should distance himself from a thing of falsehood. And it is not an easy mitzvah in this world. As we've said before, that this world is called Alma de Shikra. It's called the world of falsehood. And the world portrays itself in a certain way which is not true. We see things in our life which are not the real reality. The reality is that everything is sustained and by Hashem's word, and we don't see things that way. And therefore, we're commanded Dvar Sheker Tirchak. Distance yourself from falsehood, because we don't need to add more falsehood into the world. I want to point out a very interesting idea that we find that sometimes sometimes in this world, it's a world of falsehood. We can't tell the absolute truth. For example, like I asked Yeshiva Bakr a few months ago, I said, when you get married and your wife makes cholent and it tastes abhorrent, you can't stand it, what do you tell her? He said, hey, you should tell her it's not so good. I said, no, that's not what you tell her. She worked very hard. You have to praise it. You have to praise the cholent. You can't hurt her feelings just because you don't like how the cholent tastes. In any event, we find that mutter l'shanos b'nei shalom, it's mutter, and according to some, I believe the Rif and others say, mitzvah l'shanos b'nei shalom, it's a mitzvah to change. And we find perhaps the quintessential example, the prototype example of this obligation to sometimes to change from the truth is by Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu says to Yitzhak. Yitzhak is about to give the brachas to Yaakov Avinu, and he says, yes, are you Esav? He says, Anochi Esav B'charecha. And the question is, why Anochi? Right? It's not a normal construct. It's not normal to say Anochi. Usually say Ani. What's Anochi? What's Anochi? So the Mepharshim say Anochi is a remez. It's a hint to the first of the Yetzeres Dibros, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Right? That a person can, and in this case, was obligated. Yaakov Avinu was obligated to take these brachas from Yitzchak. Right? The Al-Shech says that had he not taken, and others say, had he not taken the brachas, it would be tremendous destruction for the world, for humanity, and for Klal Yisrael especially. And Rivka was a prophetess, and she knew Al Pi Ruach HaKodesh they had to take the brachas. But at the same time, even then, Yaakov did not want to let this act make a impact on him, that he might become rugged, he might become accustomed to lying. Because it's a slippery slope. A person starts lying, it becomes habitual. He becomes addicted to it. Because, as we said, the Alma Shikra, the world of falsehood, pulls you in and tells you all the time lie. It's a very convenient way to go through life. Right? So said Yaakov, as he was telling his father, Anoichi, right, that Esav, he didn't say Ani, he said Anoichi. He reminded himself of the Yetzeres Dibros. And I heard this in the name of Matisyahu Solomon. He said, whenever a person is forced into a situation where he must deviate from the truth, he should always remind himself. He should always remind himself that it's not the right way to do things. It's a shas adchak. It's only something because of extenuating circumstances. And we see a riot to that from David HaMelech. David HaMelech, when he was forced to act crazy, right? So he writes in that kapitel Tillim afterwards, he immediately strengthened himself in the mitzvah, deraisa, the Torah obligation to tell the truth and to stay far away from falsehood. So this is something we should remember, that if a person has to change for some reason, he should immediately strengthen himself and not let it become habitual. I was one time in the Iriyah of Yerushalayim, and there were two women there, and they were complaining. One was saying, I had to take off from work. It was so hard for me to come here to get a reduction on my property tax, etc. And they both, one was complaining to the other. And then Right after she finished her complaint, the woman asked her, "Do you work?" And she said no. And I was bothered. It was just too quick. Within Tokade Deeper, within seconds of saying that she had to take off from work, she said, "I don't work." It just felt it was too. It was a our sensitivities had been destroyed, and this is what happens in the Om and the Shikra. We can lose our sensitivities to the critical nature of telling the truth, and then we could find ourselves in the worst situations that we could possibly imagine, because our whole life becomes a just one great big falsehood, right? Someone just told me, and I heard it on the radio yesterday. It was in Lud in Eretz Israel. A man killed his wife. How does a person do that? How does a person kill his spouse? How does a person commit the worst possible atrocities that you could possibly think of? Yeah, how does it happen? It happens when we get pulled into this world of falsehood, and we create our own reality, and we think that whatever our passions are, that becomes the reality, and then that can get us to do the worst possible things we can imagine. And therefore, we should guard ourselves very carefully, guard the truth very carefully, and understand that this is something which is the most precious thing in the world that we have, is the truth, and that we have possible, um, no possible, um, no possible way to live our lives without clinging to the truth. This is the hallmark of a Jew, and this is the way we're meant to live our lives daily, and not to forget, never to forget that we live in a world of falsehood, and even if we have to get a little bit more sucked into this world of falsehood for a few moments, but immediately to pull ourselves out and to cling to the truth as much as possible. Hashem should help us to give us the greatest siyata d'shmaya to guard ourselves, to live truthfully in a world of falsehood, and never let ourselves forget this, and every moment to be attached to the truth. Amen. King through and son.